Welcome to the AP Physics 1 course. I'm going to be putting together some videos this year that will hopefully give us a way to review for some tests, cover some content, and just some outside of school practice. This first video I'm just going to give a general course overview as well as a look at the exam. So with AP Physics 1, your exam is broken up into two major sections. For both sections, you will be allowed to use a calculator. Graphing calculators are included in that, as well as your formula sheet. So there's no need to spend lots of time memorizing formulas because you will have your formula sheet with you. So make sure you're very well acquainted with that formula sheet throughout this year. The first major section on the AP1 exam is a 90-minute multiple choice section. There are 50 questions, which leaves us about just under 2 minutes per question. The last 5 of those 50 questions are what we call multi-select questions. In those, there will be 4 answer choices, but 2 of them will be correct. It will be designated which questions those are. It'll always be the last 5. And you do have to get both right to receive credit. There is not partial credit on getting 1 out of the 2. The other thing I want to make sure to note about the multiple choice section, and really the entire test as well as our course, is it's very, very easy to get into a focus of studying and working practice problems. By problems, I mean plugging into an equation and getting a numerical answer. It's when you look for practice for AP or practice for physics questions, that's going to be the most common thing that you're going to see. And unfortunately, it's not going to help you out too much because maybe 20% of the exam is really plugging numbers into your equations or rearranging your equations and getting a solid answer. Instead, with AP Physics 1, your focus is more on a deep conceptual understanding as well as interpreting graphs and models. So just trying to plug in some problems may suit you well in an on-level or pre-AP Physics course, but in AP Physics 1, we're going to ask you to go a little bit further, and you really need to understand the why behind the equation, what they represent. And we'll focus a lot this year. The second section of the exam is a 90-minute free response section, so both 90 minutes for each section. Both of them are split up 50% and 50% of your score. And the free response section is 5 questions with a total of about 45 points across the board, which leaves you about 2 minutes per point. Unfortunately, for each question, it tells you about how long each of the questions you should spend on each of the questions. So there are these 5. One of your free response questions will always be an experimental design question. Usually what that is it'll say something like, a student is asked to perform a lab to determine this physics concept. Here's what equipment would they use, how would they design a lab, and how would they analyze the results. So you'll be asked to write out a procedure for the lab. You're going to be asked to look at sources of error on that free response question. And then you're going to be asked, how would you analyze the data? So what graphs would you make? How would you run a regression? How would you find your answer from that? And then maybe after that it would say, okay, now a student did do the lab. Here's some data. What's an answer? The next one is a quantitative qualitative part. This will be more your kind of math-based questions. They'll ask you to rearrange some equations, find maybe an actual answer or at least a rearranged equation, and then ask you, well, what does this equation really mean? What does that show? What physics concept does this prove? Can you use that equation to prove this physics concept? 3 of the others will be just generic short answers. Could be a number of things, but one of them for sure will require a paragraph length response, meaning about 5 sentences of coherent paragraph and coherent writing. So we'll talk a lot about that throughout the course. There's a lot of resources out there, and I would definitely suggest you take a look at those. Keep tuning in for these videos to hopefully get some good reviewing. Thanks.